So after a few years of success with the Vampire Diaries, a couple of smart people decided, why don't we make a spin-off with, some of the coolest characters from the series, and from that we get the originals. Um, I really enjoyed the premiere. It kind of sucks that the specific characters, obviously being um, the originals, are leaving the Vampire Diaries because they had their cool moments in the series, and Klaus is a really great villain to me. Like out of any show I've ever seen, he is definitely one of my favorite villains, and his family dynamic is always really cool. He's really angry all the time, but he's really loyal to family until he decides I'm just gonna be angrier. So then he's always like stabbing somebody, and they can't kill him because he's far too powerful. And then they have the whole dynamics where he can't be killed off, but of course they have to make someone who's even stronger, which we have with the Vampire Diaries now with Silas. So it's cool to see how he had that transition from he was the ultimate villain to now there's someone even greater, and so they kind of pull them out of the series to have their own series. And we got the yeah, I guess we kind of had the premiere in one of the episodes for the Vampire Diaries, which shows they generally do that when they decide we're gonna make a spin-off. We're gonna do an episode that introduces this element to the show, or this introduces this new show really. And so the pilot episode for the originals was kind of like the other half of that, where in the Vampire Diaries it was all about Klaus and everything he did when he went back after all this time and met his protege again, and he goes through all the struggles dealing with he losing his family and not having the power and respect that he felt he deserved. And then in this episode of the originals, the premiere, we get to see Elijah go around, and he's kind of in the background of all these scenes. So we have some of the clips from the originals episode from Vampire Diaries, and then we get a lot of background story from Elijah and some of the things that he did. Him talking to Rebecca, and him talking to the witches and doing all sorts of things. And I guess the last 10 minutes or so was pretty much all new footage, right? Not 10 minutes, probably like the last 5 to 6 minutes or something like that. But they had little scenes dropped in here and there, and it was actually pretty well done. It does cover a recap of everything that happened in the originals episode of the Vampire Diaries, while also giving people who saw that episode and are devoted to the show already, because they like the Vampire Diaries, new footage that isn't just rehashing old stuff. So for people who aren't interested in the Vampire Diaries, who somehow get interested in the originals, which I find that to be kind of weird. I think it would be difficult, but at the same time, with the show being so different, it could attract new members, or not new members, but new viewers, to the originals rather than the Vampire Diaries, because while this does still, with love and stuff like that, it's not relationship stuff. It's more like family relations, and people dealing with power dynamics and all types of crazy espionage type stuff with vampires and witches, and then like hidden super witches apparently. So I think this series will be a lot more dramatic than Vampire Diaries as far as the family aspect, because in Vampire Diaries it's mostly just loving someone new in your life rather than continuing to love someone who's been there the whole time for hundreds of years, because obviously they're the original, so they've been alive for so long. But this episode I thought was very well done. Like I said, the new clips that we got, a little bit of added footage. It was mostly stuff that we still knew, but at least it was new stuff, set in a new way, or at least old stuff set in a new way. And the beginning of the episode does start off with them like 300 years ago when they first got to Louisiana. So that was a pretty cool scene. And then once they go through the whole episode and get to the end, and Elijah, and I can't remember her name at all, but who's pretty much going to be like his new stepsister or sister-in-law. I mean, he says like, I'll protect you forever. And then Klaus comes in, and they have their little talk, and they had a great twist because it actually surprised me a lot. And Elijah's talking to Klaus, and Klaus says, there's one thing and once again, I can't remember his protege's name either. But like there's one thing that he could exploit. Like there's one great weakness, and Elijah's like, what's that? And Klaus just says you, and he just stabs him. And I was actually like, oh no way! Like it really surprised me so much because the show is obviously the original, so it's supposed to be those three because obviously their brother died, and I believe they stabbed the other brother, so he's like somewhere else. I can't even remember what happened to him, but he's just off somewhere. And it was so crazy that at the end of this episode, they already seem to cut it down because Rebecca, isn't even in Louisiana at this point because it's technically during the last season of the Vampire Diaries. So they haven't, like if you watch the Vampire Diaries, then you watch this, it's been the whole summer and they had 3 months and then Rebecca left. So I'm curious to see how they do, you know, the next episode because I'm curious if it's going to go through the 3 months of summer where it's just Klaus and basically only Klaus because he stabbed Elijah, and then Rebecca's off in like Italy or wherever she was when they mentioned it in the Vampire Diaries. So I'm curious to see how they do that, or if they're gonna just span the 3 months, maybe in the next episode, or if they're just gonna like skip over it and basically recap it in a couple of minutes. But either way, I think that'll be pretty interesting to see how much time with all the time that passes, how much things really change because obviously Klaus is, working with the witches to basically, protect his child and have a new family so he can have kind of more power and, like the infinite respect that Elijah was talking about, that, unbridled love from his child. But, he's like trying to flip over on his protege and take over and kill him. And then his protege has like a hidden witch who is apparently so powerful that even the originals don't stand a chance. So I'm really excited to see how that plays out. And obviously, we're gonna get more backstory for from the protege and how he basically rose to power and how he became so important to Klaus in the past. But I'm excited for this series for sure. The first episode, pretty well done, and I'm just excited to see where things go and how they definitely how they tie it into Vampire Diaries because I'm sure with it being the same universe there are going to be cameos where the originals might go back to Mystic Falls, or characters might come in from Mystic Falls to Louisiana, and they'll be on the episode of an episode of the originals for whatever reason, like, hey, we need you to do this because you guys are so powerful, this or that, or they need to find other witches, or they need to somehow tie the witches in Louisiana into somehow reviving Bonnie and things like that. So it'd be cool to see the little cameos, which they're definitely going to do because it would be hard not to, especially with Klaus and his family being so huge from the Vampire Diaries that they're great villains and they're like almost all powerful. So they kind of have to continue to tie them in at least every once in a while. So it'd be cool to see that. But the originals on its own, I think, is gonna be a great show. And I think Elijah is like one of the characters I always want to see more of, just because of his demeanor. He's always very calm, but he's he's calculating. Whereas like he's the calculating character, Klaus is the angry one, and then Rebecca is like the naive one, and she just wants things to be so simple, but she can never have it that simple because of her brothers, and mostly because of Klaus, because he's trying to get all this power. So I'm definitely excited to see more of Elijah and just his interaction, with his siblings and pretty much with anyone else, because like I said, he's barely really been in the Vampire Diaries. So I'm excited to see him get more spotlight because I do like him as a character. He's always just like in a suit, really calm, try to get things done. And even in the fight scene that they had in this episode, it was fairly simplistic. So I'm excited. I'll be interested to see him actually kind of go all out because he hit Klaus a little bit, and he did like flip him on to like a box, and a bunch of dust came up, dramatic stuff. And then like he killed the vampires. He like ripped the guy's heart out and threw the one guy up on the stake, but he never really has like a challenge. But he is an original, so it'll be hard for that to happen unless they kind of bring in this super witch and whatever it is she can do to them. So I'm excited for the series. I think it was a great first episode. Can't wait for. I believe it comes on Tuesdays. They just did the special premiere because Vampire Diaries is still on Thursdays. So I'm excited for the show. Obviously, comment below. Let me know what you thought of the premiere. Are you excited for this spinoff? Because I think it's one of the few spinoffs, or like I barely ever seem to watch spinoff shows, but I think this one is going to be really good, especially considering the Vampire Diaries is still on. Because generally they try to do it, it's like, oh, we'll do a spinoff because we're going to end this series, and I highly doubt the Vampire Diaries is going to end like anytime soon. But comment below, let me know what you thought of the first episode and what you think things are going to be like for the originals from now on. Thanks for watching.